Hey everyone. So you guys are getting ready to read Mouse 1 and Mouse 2, which the collective is generally we refer to as Mouse. And this is a story, I have some information here, but this is a story about the Holocaust. And it is a graphic novel. So yes, it's a comic book. So woohoo! But as you guys know, when we're looking at at visual text, then there's some different skills and things that you guys are going to practice. But this is one of my favorite units of the year. I'm sad that we don't get to do it in person, but we're going to slog through and do it online as best we can. So what I want you guys to do with this is I want you guys to absorb the information, take notes if you guys have to. I'm not checking your notes, although, of course, the occasional note might be really helpful for you. Mouse 1 and Mouse 2. The complete title for this collection is Mouse, A Survivor's Tale, and it was published in 2 volumes. Now, Art Spiegelman published this in 2 volumes primarily because it was a graphic novel. He worked on this over a 13-year span, okay, these 2 volumes. And now we find them published together as one, but I do have the attachment for you guys that I have is the first volume as one file and then the second volume as another file. But the first volume is Mouse the Survivor's Tale 1, My Father Bleeds History, and that was published in 1986. And then we have Mouse the Survivor's Tale 2, and Here My Troubles Began, published in 1991. And even though they were published 5 years apart, then they are meant to be read together, right, as one long piece. Now, these books, even though they are graphic novels, they are really difficult to classify because we have elements of fiction. This is a graphic novel, so it's a cartoon. So no matter how close to the truth it is, it's still a representation of the truth, right? It's not what actually happened, right? It's a representation, which, as you guys know, even when you're looking at primary source documents, you're looking at like an eyewitness account or a video or a picture, as we've talked about in class before, that is one perspective, right, of this of an event. And Mouse is no different. It is one perspective of the Holocaust. And if you think about it, even though we will be hearing Art Spiegelman's father's words as a Holocaust survivor, then it is also being relayed through Art's perspective himself as the son of a Holocaust survivor. So we need to be thinking about those layers of perspective as you guys are reading this. But we have those elements of fiction. We obviously have elements of nonfiction. That's going to be Vladek's actual words that he uses, as well as when you guys see Art and his wife living in the present day. This book goes back and forth between the past and the present. And of course, the present that we're talking about is in the 80s and 90s. And it also has biography, right? When we're talking about somebody else, when Art is talking about his father, right? That would be biography. We also have autobiography where Art is talking about himself. You guys will see this. This will make a little bit more sense as we get into the book. So just some background information for you. Mouse is a story within a story, like I said before on that slide before. We've got Art Spiegelman. He's the son of 2 survivors of the Holocaust, both his mother and his father, although one could argue that his mother isn't really a survivor of the Holocaust. We'll talk about this later. But you guys will see what happens with her. But we have 2 survivors of the Holocaust, and it tells how he interviewed his father, Vladek, about his and his mother, Anya's Holocaust experience, as well as the story of his father's persecution and survival. Okay, as you guys can see, obviously we only have the father's perspective, and you guys will find out why in the text, why we don't have Anya's perspective. But this story gives the reader insight into that relationship that Art has with his father, as well as his search for understanding as the child of Holocaust survivor parents. This was before your time, but as you guys can imagine, a traumatic event like that in regards to like trauma upon trauma upon trauma of losing your entire family, living through a concentration camp. You guys have all read the history. You guys have seen the stories. That's going to change who you are fundamentally as a person, right, inside. And Art is the child of those parents, right? And so these people who've gone through this and are completely different people than they would have been, right, if they hadn't gone through it, then they raised Art. And Art searches for that understanding, right, within himself as he tries to come to peace within himself for being the child of survivors. As like I said before, it's written in a graphic novel format, and there's various types of animals that are representing the various nationalities and the religions that are portrayed in the book. The one constant, though, is that Jews are always represented as mice, no matter what nationality they are, whether they're American Jews, German Jews, Polish Jews, Jews from anywhere. Then they're always represented as mice. Although the mice do change a little bit, their features change. And you guys will be able to see that. And also, what I want you guys really to note is whenever a new race, nationality, or religion is introduced, note what animal they are. I have some notes on this, but I'm hoping to not give them to you. I'm hoping you guys can kind of figure out that meaning yourself. From those animals. There's a lot of resources online. Try not to, use Google too much right now. I want you guys to experience the text. I want you guys to see what you guys can pick up first. And then, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But definitely when you see a new character introduced, okay, as an animal, then write down the animal and write down where they're from, okay? Write down what religion they are, what nationality they are, just so you guys can kind of keep running notes, on those, because those are going to be important later. A little bit about the author. We've got the author's name is Art Spiegelman. I have a picture of him right there when he was a little bit younger. He's a little bit older now. But he was born in 1948 in Stockholm, Sweden. But now he is a naturalized U.S. citizen. So his family moved to the United States, and he has been naturalized as a citizen. He grew up in Queens, New York, which is one of the boroughs of New York, with his parents, Vladek and Anya. And his most significant accomplishment in his career was from 1966 to 1989. He worked for Topps Chewing Gum as an illustrator of trading cards and stickers, including the Garbage Pail series. If you guys Google that, you guys can see what some of his drawing looks like. Obviously he's an artist, so all artists have a very, similar style, as we have been talking about third quarter, and obviously we will continue to talk about at the end of the year. In theory, once you know enough about different writers, you could read a text and you'd immediately be able to say, that's this person. We talked a little bit about that in your guys' class in regards to voice, right? I should be able to read an essay and it screams Malcolm's name or it screams Graciana's name, right? Like I should know that it's your essay before I even look at your name. And art is no different, right? Art is the same way. So once you get to know a lot of artists, then you'll be able to recognize, before even looking at who the author is, you'll be able to recognize that work, that's from that author. Art Spiegelman definitely is no different. So definitely check it out. Google Garbage Pail series, Google Topps Chewing Gum. There's some really cool illustrations and cartoons that he did. So we're going to continue a little bit with Spiegelman. He has written many comics with an X at the end of it. Those are Underground Comics. I'm not sure how much you guys know about Underground Comics, but those are comic strips that maybe show things that people are uncomfortable with. Okay, you're talking about kind of the rated R comics, all right, of the comic world. So, if you think back in your mind of like the Marvel comics, those were pretty tame, right? You've got Batman, you've got like the Joker, you've got the Hulk, and, although these are great superheroes and super cool, right, they are primarily written for kids, right? And then you have comics with the X, those underground comics. Now, those comics are going to portray, maybe more real things, maybe drug use, right? They might portray suicide. They might portray, any manner of like racism, sexism, rape, right? Those types of things that are difficult to talk about and they're difficult to discuss, but Underground Comics have always made it a point, right, to do those. And those are not comics that you're necessarily going to see on a mainstream, like that olden days comic store shelf, but you can find them. I did found a couple at Barnes & Noble. So they are being carried by big retailers, although generally it's like a smaller population that always demanded those Underground Comics, right? So they were kind of circulated more by word of mouth until they got to be, of course, until we had the internet to circulate them. But he also worked as a New Yorker staff artist and writer. We've looked at the New Yorker in class when we were looking at rhetoric. It was one of the magazines. I'm not sure how much you guys remember, but the New Yorker is generally a political magazine. So it tackles political pieces, it tackles society pieces, and it has, definitely a liberal slant to it. But he was a staff artist and writer for many, many years, and then ended up leaving the New Yorker in a very controversial time. It was right after 9/11, and he did not agree with going to war with Iraq because I will make this, guess, right? But in looking at war, if you're looking at the Holocaust and you're looking at killing people and what he experienced, he is very anti-war. And when the New Yorker, the editorial staff came out with a piece that supported going to war in Iraq, then Spiegelman resigned. Although he said later he regretted it because he felt like maybe he would have had a larger platform to get his voice across. He did resign. He felt very important at the time to resign. His work has been the subject of special museum and gallery exhibits both in the United States and abroad, okay, not just in Germany and the United States, but also in many countries. And if you guys look up the comics magazine, this is going to be an underground comic, Raw, then he is very noted for his work on Raw. And it is definitely some powerful stuff that he tackles there. Maus earned him several prizes. I have them listed here. He also won a Pulitzer for Maus because it was so well done and the symbolism and the meaning was so intricate. And that is why we're reading a graphic novel in English 102. So the last informational slide I have for you guys is the setting, and I did want to talk about this. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the book does weave in and out of two timelines. We've got the timeline of the present and then the timeline of the past. And he does some very interesting uses some interesting artistic elements to differentiate and separate that present and past, and you guys are going to be able to see that because on each page you might see both present and past, and we're going to talk about that as we get into it. But we've got the frame tale of the narrative present. Vladek's conversations with Art, they take place in the 1970s and 80s and in three different spots primarily, right? The family home in Queens, a vacation spots in the Catskills, like where they're in the Catskills Mountains, like where they might be vacationing, and at a home in Florida where Vladek and Mala, who's Vladek's second wife, spend part of their time. So you guys will see these conversations in those different locales in regards to that's the present time, right? And then Maus 1, that's the story that Vladek tells, and it's depicted in the past, and it begins in the mid-1930s. So this is before World War II started. But it follows Vladek in Poland in the years leading up to World War II, and then Maus 2 continues, right? Vladek continues the story in Maus 2 about his experiences at various work and death camps in Europe, including Auschwitz, Birkenau, and Dachau, until the end of the Holocaust in 1945. That's when the series ends. So you guys will have the opportunity to kind of see a long period of time in regards to like about 10 years of Vladek's life.